Aloha, everybody. Um, Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Jason, for inviting me to share a little bit about our story. Um, I want to start by asking you folks, how many of you have ever visited an ancient Hawaiian fish pond anywhere in the islands? Ooh. So 30 years ago, when we started this journey, and if I asked that question, probably no hand would go up. So there's been, I observe that we have been making some progress. So just a bit of context. In the history of Hawaii, there were, according to DLNR, there are a little over 500 of these ponds that were built from 800 years ago. Our pond is about 400 years old. And as we sit here right now in the 21st century, 90% of these ponds have vanished from the landscape. So when I come to places like this, it doesn't give me a lot of pride, but I have to say that in the 21st century, the Hawaiian Loko is on the verge of vanishing from the landscape. So there's only about 10%, maybe about 40 or 50 that are left. KUA is in the room. They are our umbrella organization that has been trying to coalesce the hui of Loko practitioners to try to hold on to this ancient wisdom. And so the topic of what I want to share really briefly, my 30 years of experience in 20 minutes, is looking to the past to chart our way forward. And what that means is that, when people ask me, what do? I say, I'm a bridge builder. What does that mean? That means that I have found myself in this place where I'm building bridges between indigenous wisdom that I've learned over the last 30 years at the local I'a, and being Native Hawaiian, and being growing up all my life in the islands, and then combining that with contemporary science and technology. Why? Because the problems that we have facing the local I'a today in the 21st century requires all of it for us to be able to problem solve, bringing these local I'a back, and hopefully aquaculture and the greater agriculture industry in Hawaii. We live in the middle of the Pacific, and the most isolated landmass on the planet. Before, as Jim said, before Western contact, we know that the Hawaiian people that were living here were totally independent from any source of food from outside of Hawaii. And so as we stand and sit here now in the 21st century, as we've learned yesterday, for those of you that are visiting the islands and don't know, 80 to 90% of our food and energy doesn't even come from here anymore. So what happened in the last 250 years for us being totally independent to being almost totally dependent? And I think that's why we're here today, to figure out how we can hopefully restore at least a semblance of a balance. But it's not going to take just us in this room. And I'm hoping that at the end of my speech and at the end of today that you can be inspired to be a champion of change in Hawaii, because it is absolutely critical, I think. If those ships and planes stop coming, we have less than 2 weeks of food. And in my lifetime, we've experienced ships and planes not coming, and people panic. So the journey that I want to, this is my clicker, right? Okay. So is it? Okay. This bridge between indigenous wisdom, I'm not going to read that, but this is kind of like our mission statement, so to speak, of what we do, what we've accomplished, what we're trying to do, how we're building bridges. And part of the story in talking about indigenous technology really goes back to also how we can inspire the next generation and the next generation and the next generation, just like our kupuna have taught us. So this is very important. I want to start off with two olelo no'eau. Olelo no'eau is wise sayings. This is wisdom that comes down, through the generations. And for whatever reason, these two specific olelo no'eau have resonated with us from the first days of this restoration process. Ohe pau ka ike I ka halau ho'okahi. That means all knowledge not learned in one school. And what does that mean? yes, there's knowledge in many different sources, but it also refers to a state of mind that we need to have, and that is to be humble, to be able to know that we don't know everything in this room, that we have to open ourselves up to all of these possibilities so that we can focus on the larger vision and mission, and that is to rebalance this import and our ability to be able to be food secure again in some fashion. And the other one is makahana ka'ike, and the knowledge comes from doing. So nobody gave us a manual 30 years ago to restore ancient Hawaiian ponds. We searched all the literature, we talked to the kupuna, whoever was around, tried to amass as much information, and we just embarked on the journey. And hopefully we tried to do it in a way so that we were all, as we say in Hawaii, you know, we live in the 21st century is the age of navigation, is to be able to navigate, you know, together, collectively, in the same direction, going to the same place. So briefly, Loko in Hawaii, this simple graphic that was put together by Sea Grant many years ago, Dr. Clyde Tamaro, who is one of the scientists that have worked with us in developing our programs, shows, so these are the two principal fish, they're herbivores, the ama and the ava, the milkfish. And this simple graphic shows that utilizing ancient Hawaiian technology was 100 times more efficient than Mother Nature. And doing it in a way that was very symbiotic with understanding the power of nature and how the water flowed from the mountain to the sea. Our pond, Waikalua Loko I'a, to give you a context again, we're in the southern part of Kaneohe Bay, between the Bayview Golf Course and the Kokokahi Y. As I said, it's 400 years old, and in 2010, we were already 15 years into the restoration of the pond. Honolulu Magazine wrote this article that they considered our fish pond as probably one of the most endangered sites, cultural sites in Hawaii at the time. And I gotta say thanks to Honolulu Magazine, because all of a sudden, you know, people wanted to come and help even more. What was going on, you know, and so that became sort of a catalytic point for us to be able to, you know, coalesce ideas and passions and continue to move on. So I just want to share quickly a little bit about myself. I grew up about less than half a mile from this pond, and I didn't know that this pond existed until I was 40 years old. And so, you know, talk about, you know, we live in the age of our kids, you know, are disconnected from understanding where food comes from. Those first kids that came down to the pond, you know, I got a call from a Castle High School teacher teaching science. And she had these 15 Native Hawaiian kids, 11 and 12th graders. They weren't on the path to graduate. She said, Herb, I saw that little article in the paper that you're asking for people to come help you at the pond. And she said, can I bring my kids down to your pond? Because I'm not reaching them in the classroom, and maybe I can teach them science in a different way in the context of your fish pond. And I said, sure, why not? I said, you know, you got to meet my friend, Dr. Clyde, tomorrow. He's an aquaculture specialist. Maybe we could put a little ad hoc curriculum together. 9 months later, we saw this amazing transformation in these kids. They not only became inspired learners, they became passionate about what they were learning. And more importantly, they understood the relevance of what they were learning to make a meaningful difference in the restoration of the pond. So we asked ourselves 3 questions. Can we duplicate this? Can we reach more kids if we provided them a context for learning like this? And imagine if, when they were in the kindergarten, they had an experience every year to come to context places like this, and what they would become by the time they're 11 and 12th graders as stewards of the Aina. So they said I had to write grants. And I said, what is that? So I went to every grant writing workshop for 3 years, and I wrote grants, and I didn't win anything. I was really dejected. This is part of my journey, right? So then I partnered with the Pacific American Foundation, and then the rest is history. So this picture, I thought I was restoring an ancient Hawaiian fish pond in 1993, 1995. But that path took me on many other journeys. And, in those early days, the call for help, we didn't have any money. The pond was in really disarray. It was like a dump. There were 300 abandoned vehicles. It was a really bad shape, totally almost overgrown with mangrove within the pond. It took us 26 years to remove the mangrove from inside the pond. 26 years. For the first 20 years, we didn't even own the pond. The land was bought by foreign investors that had bought Baby Golf Course, and they bought it because they thought they could build a hole in the middle of it. And they didn't realize that it was a cultural site. And that's, I was at the right time at the right place. I got involved, and I said, I'll form a nonprofit organization, get community people, and we'll take care of the pond. Because this is my Aina. I came from this area. The point is that, with that story with the kids, these pathways have allowed us to not only learn and figure out, the indigenous wisdom of these ponds that comes with years of being able to observe the ecosystem and how it interacts from Mauka to Makai. I believe that these ponds are the litmus test for the Ahupua'a because everything flows down to me, right? And the streams are degraded. Water quality, we can't even grow fish. We can grow fish, but we cannot sell it because water quality is bad. So how are we going to change that? We believe that, part of the investment in the restoration of the pond was to teach the kids. And Tipua Burgess told us, if you plant for 1 year, you plant taro. If you plant for 10 years, you plant koa. If you plant for 100 years, teach the kids. That's what we did. And now we've had thousands and thousands of people that have come down to help us because now they have an opportunity to understand not only learning and using these places as community classrooms, but be able to understand the relevance of what they're learning and to be able to make a meaningful difference in that process, no matter what grade you're in. That's the beauty of it. And the accumulation and inspiration over many years has been able to transform me in terms of how we educate our kids in Hawaii and more directly how we actually restore some of these ancient Hawaiian sites to become viable places where these bridges are being built between indigenous wisdom and contemporary science and technology. Does that make sense? So we have to reimagine. We have to reimagine. Thank you. So, anyway, I'm not going to get into the whole transformation of education in Hawaii. That's a whole nother lecture. So the pond has become the pico of our organization, and we have built many of these bridges with the family court system now, with the Department of Education, the University of Hawaii. We have over 200 partners worldwide that come and help us now. But I'm also mindful that all of these opportunities have been built based on, our holding our culture and indigenous wisdom and what our kupuna have taught us about looking at doing these things with a generational mindset. Because these problems that need to be solved is not something that we're going to solve next year or 5 years or 10 years from now. It's going to be generational. And we have to wake up and we have to decide that every decision that we make today in our regular lives has to incorporate a generational mindset. What is the impact of that decision on the next generation and the next generation today? Otherwise, we're going to be at the same place 30 years from now. I've gone through 30 years of this, so I'm passionate about this. I've learned some things. I'm a product of Hawaii's education system. I have a message to be able to share with you that I've learned that I think can empower the next generation for all of us to do better. And it's not just a Hawaiian issue. It's everybody that calls Hawaii home to be able to get off your butt and do something. Become a producer again. We have flipped the balance to become an undeterred consumer And we have forgot to balance, we call it in Hawaiian lokahi, of how we can be a producer and produce something, give back something, and not just consume, 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 consume. Then it's like this. So whether it's knowledge, whether it's food, whether it's music or art, whatever gifts and talents you have, you need to be able to have a producer mindset if we're going to flip or balance this out over the next generation or two. I know my time is kind of running short. So these pictures are just an idea of what a community classroom is like. And I'm a big advocate. There's been a wave of activity throughout the country, and it's only kind of come to our shores in Hawaii over the last few years. And I'm a big advocate of this, and that is turning these places into community classrooms. Because I believe that we live in the greatest community classroom on the planet. Why? Because we can go outside and teach our kids any time of the year because of our weather. People on the continent cannot do that. And how many times, if you guys have children, how many times do they actually go outside of the four walls of a classroom to go learn? That is a travesty. And, I've had thousands of these kids. I've seen with my own eyes 30 years ago and even today, when they first come to these places, that the look of wonderment that they have in their faces and understanding that, wow, they're motivated to learn, they're motivated to give back. So this is our pond. And this goes to the bridge idea. And, during the pandemic time, we couldn't bring the kids down to our pond. We used technology to be able to actually bring these ponds to them. So this is Kaneohe Bay, that's our pond right there. And so this is, in 2023, this is kind of where we are. 2015, we actually, after 20 years, we're actually able to acquire these ponds. Actually, we own 2 of them. We've only been restoring 1 so far. And then we put a conservation easement over it in 2021 so that it'll be protected no matter what happens to me or my organization. The local ia at Waikalua will be protected in perpetuity forever. Thank you. So I want to end by saying that last year in January, we rededicated the pond for the next 30 years. Now that we've done most of the physical restoration, and it's a 24/7 thing, so you're never really finished with maintaining and restoring these local ia. And my pond is only 10 or 11 acres. It's considered a baby pond in the scheme of fish ponds. The largest being Kauai Nui, which was about 700, 800 acres. Hawaii Kai, what we call Hawaii Kai today, that was 500 acres. Moli'i Fish Pond, where Kualoa Ranch is the largest in Kaneohe Bay now, 125 acres. Paepae'ia, about 88 acres. Kalahui Pua'a, Danny and Ana are here. They're the caretakers on the Big Island. They probably have some of the most prolific ponds in terms of fish production I've ever seen. So go visit them. But we rededicated ourselves now, and we'll talk a little bit maybe more about this later on, Jim, in the afternoon during the panel discussion about some of the initiatives that we're collectively all looking at. But we rededicated ourselves to now focus on the original intent of why these ponds were built in the first place, and that is to feed people. And we want to start with feeding our community, Kaneohe. And in the process of us learning that, we've partnered with UHC Grant now over 30 years, the University of Hawaii. Some of the top research minds are working with us. This is our classroom. We created all of these on-ground tanks. We haven't been able to grow fish in the pond, so what we're doing is we're taking water from the pond, putting them in these tanks through various different types of filters, and in my very, very lame kind of analogy, I call it like the three bear experiment. Some little bit too cold, too warm, too hot, right? Different filtering processes to figure out what works best in a number of these tanks, and trying to figure out how we figured out how to grow Lima Manawea really well and really quickly, and we're hoping that within the next year we can begin to go to market. on production of lima manawea. But fish are a long way off. And I'll be happy to talk more about the technology that we're using. We're using this thing called an integrated multi-trophic system, creating these symbiotic relationships in these tanks between limu, fish, and bivalves. And we can talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But the point is that we're going to focus now all of everything that we've learned, all of the partnerships that we have, to focus on figuring out how we could be a catalyst and to be able to share that research and knowledge with all of the local iho, whoever else is interested in this, so that we can restore that balance between the import and export industry. So, the future of these ponds, I'm not going to read that, but this, you can kind of see that, education is part of the stewardship activity. It is very critical, I think, going forward, but it is also important for you to know that these places the remaining ponds can be a wonderful catalyst to be able to figure out how we can merge indigenous wisdom with contemporary science and technology. And I really learned a lot yesterday on the agricultural stuff, Jim, and we have employing all different kinds of technology in the pond. We can analyze our own data remotely from anywhere we can. So, we use them all. We use all of the computers, all of the different kinds of things. Right after me is going to be Dr. Brian Glacier. He's deployed some of his equipment in our pond over the years collecting data, and he can share a little bit more about that. So this journey, I'm going to end here. This journey has not been easy. It's been challenging, but we have learned a lot. But I feel like we've only learned this much, and that there's way more to learn. And I welcome you guys to join us in this journey in whatever capacity you can, and look forward to the next 30 years that we can begin to flip this lokahi, this balance again. Aloha. Thank you very much.